You know, it's been quite some time since I made a video. It's been quite some time since I've had any time. I've been working on so many different things, from revamping my editing workflow to revamping my website. I've been working on a lot of stuff on a personal level, working stuff with clients. There's just been so much that's been going on. So the hiatus has definitely been real. But we're still here, we're still alive, we're still kicking. It's been about like 4 or 5 months. I mean, yeah, it's October now. November is almost here. Fall is here, and so is long sleeve and hoodie season, beanie season. I love the fall. It's my all-time favorite season of the year. It's just something about the cold, and winter is definitely on its way. It's creeping up fast, and I'm pumped for it. But anyways, what's going on? My name is Mikey Olexy. Welcome back to another video. It's been quite some time, obviously. How have things been for you? I hope everything has been going smooth sailing. And for those who are new here, what's going on? My name is Mikey. And speaking of my whole revamp on editing workflow, I figured it's been a while since I posted any type of video content showing how I edit my photos from the beginning. So yeah, it's been, I think, almost 2 years. It's 2022, almost 2023, and we're gonna be editing a photo today. So let's jump into Lightroom here and let's get started. So here's a photo of Josh. We were hiking up Mount Marshall in the Adirondacks. It was 4 mountains in two days. This past July, actually, I believe this was the last trip that we did. But I chose this photo because the lighting is very flat. When we were hiking, at least on this day, it was mostly just like off and on, kind of light rain, and then the sun would peek out for a couple minutes, and then, you know, it'd be crazy overcast again. And then more towards the evening, golden hour, actually, to be specific, before nightfall, that's when the sun really came out, and I was lucky to get some good shots. But I figured that I would edit something that'd be kind of tricky because the lighting is just really flat. So what I like to do is, before I do anything, is I like to look at my image and I like to think exactly what do I want to do with it and what direction I want to go with the photo. And I like to do this by looking at a dark background and a light background by, instead of using lights out, lights on, as I would call it, hitting L, and you can switch this to white as a white background. That way you can kind of see, you know, how bright the whites are and how dark the darks are by looking at both sides of the spectrum. And then I like to work starting off in the darker parts of my images and then work my way up. But nothing is ever set in stone as you're editing, and sometimes you gotta tweak some things. So let's start. I usually start with the curves, drop down those shadows nice and deep. And then what I like to do is then I like to actually use Shift and Alt, because, and anytime that I say Alt here, Option on your Mac keyboard, same thing with Control, that is Command. So Alt and Shift, and this allows me to have more control with my points, because when you hold Shift, the point only goes vertical, and then when you hold Alt, it actually gives you more control and it acts slower rather than very harsh, quick adjustments. So I like to use Shift and Alt. I'm gonna bring this down roughly about there, and then we're going to bring up the shadows very, very slightly. We're probably gonna bring the blacks in just a little bit. Let's see, double click just in case. Yeah, bring them up just a little bit, and we'll bring this down to 2. That's looking good. And then now I like to bring a mid-tone point here. I'll bring them up just a little bit. Get nice and bright. And we're going to keep our highlights where they are. Bring down these highlights a little bit. Don't want to bring them down too much, because then things get kind of like HDR. You don't want that, because it just doesn't, in my opinion, it just doesn't really fit exactly what I go for. I'll bring down those whites a little bit more too as well. And then we're going to bring up these blacks. Nice and faded. And bring those shadows over. Now another thing I like to do is I like to also look at these numbers here. See how they pop up in the upper left corner of the tone curve? I like to look at those numbers because then I know if I have went way overboard or not. And you can be a little bit more accurate to where if you just want to make very subtle adjustments, like we'll just say 50 over 40, you know, you can just be very meticulous with your adjustments. And then we're going to bring these whites down just a little bit to make them more soft in the curve. Alrighty, and then I don't like to use the contrast slider because I feel like the contrast slider just adds this like blanket of contrast and it becomes very heavy and it can actually kind of wreck an image in my opinion. So I'd only use that to kind of bring my effect on contrast down a little bit. But in this case, we're probably just going to leave it where it is and we'll bring up the exposure by 0.05. Very subtle adjustments because small steps make big impacts. Bring down the clarity a little bit here. Bring up the texture. I feel like that adds a little bit of crispiness. Maybe just bring it to like B4, not too drastic. And then we might come back to the curve later. And at this point, I like to look at my image and see how much of a difference we made. So before, backslash, after, and then I like to also look on the white background as well to look at the differences as well. And I also like to check along the way with a white background because that way I know what my image is going to look like when I'm going to post it on a website or my socials, or even get it printed and there's a white background. And then of course you have the best of both worlds if you go to a darker background as your native editing workspace. And then now what we're going to do is we're going to work our way down to the calibration. Just making some checks here. Bring this down to maybe, we'll start at 5 in the blues. Maybe bring it up just a little bit. And we'll just go down to like maybe 5. 4. Greens. Probably not going to do too much, just bring them up to +2. Look at those oranges or reds. Maybe that +4. Control Z means undo, so about maybe adding some saturation to those blues, just a little bit. All right. We can see it before and after by clicking this tab. It's very subtle, but it's there. All right, now what we're going to work up to is I'm going to go to my temperature because I feel like that can use a little bit of warmth. Nothing too drastic, probably like right about there. Maybe bring it down to like 5,500. And I'm weird with like when I edit, it's like I edit by the numbers, so like 5,500 or 5,550, 5,575. I try not to, I don't know, it's just, that's how I just usually am. I'm weird, I guess. But now we're going to work with the hue, saturation, and luminance. Starting off with the hue. I used to not use the color picker because I kind of wanted to understand how the colors worked manually, rather than just clicking a color and just, you know, sliding. But they can definitely help when it comes down to affecting the colors that are within the image by just like clicking on the trees here. As you can see, a lot of the greens, but a little bit of the yellows. Double click hue and resets everything. So we're going to bring up these greens just a little bit to like +1. Maybe bring down the saturation just a little bit here. Like I said, I like to work within the sections of my images, because in that way we're going to work with the greens and then we'll work with the next color, and then that way everything's just very coherent and it just flows, you know, one step at a time. That way you're not all over the place as well. So greens are looking pretty good, and we'll work our way over to the oranges because that's Josh's skin tones here. They're looking a little yellow, so we'll add some oranges in there. Maybe bring up that just a little bit, bring up the luminance just slightly, and then there's blue in his shirt, so we're going to pick the shirt. As you can see here, there's some blues and there's also a little bit of purples, so probably just bring it down to 4, bring up that saturation there, and make those blues. Oh, going crazy here. Yep, see, it's even affecting his hat and his backpack. Let's bring it up to like maybe about 12. Okie dokie, awesome. And like before, with each section, we like to have our little checkpoints here. Check to see how things are, where we started, where we're ending up to. Things are looking pretty good here. I feel like we could move this over a little bit to like maybe 55. And bring this up. Kind of soften that up a little bit. Maybe bring it to like 20. Now we'll keep it there, and we'll actually bring down just a little bit, because I don't want it too contrasty, but I don't want it to be too flat. And the midtones can definitely induce a lot of light. Again, like watch. See, it brings a lot of light on the trees, and I don't really want that. I try to stay as natural as possible with my images, because you know, you don't want to bring things that aren't supposed to be there into the photo. You kind of just want to work with what you have. You're just enhancing, making things pop, making things look good. So a little bit of a pro tip. We're going to be working to the color grading section here. Usually you start off with this color grading section, and there's this little tab here. It's a triangle, faces to the left. I had no idea what that was until I clicked on it, and look, boom, we have the hidden sliders from like back when Lightroom didn't have the color wheels. But I like to use the color wheels to choose my hue. So with this, I'm thinking, so we're gonna work with the highlights here. I'm thinking to add a little bit of greens. Just a little bit. Green yellows. Nothing too much. And then with the shadows, we're gonna introduce some oranges. I like to warm up my shadows. I don't do this with every single image with the color wheels. The colors vary depending on how the light is, or you know, depending on what time the shot was taken, and of course the environment. So being that there's a lot of green going on here, and that there's light coming from the trees, which are green, I want to kind of like bring that to life with the highlights, because that's what is going on in the highlights. And then with the shadows, of course, warm them up with just a little bit to add a little bit of life in there. And then I like to, if you hold Alt on blending, you can see how much of what color is blending what. So I usually go to roughly around 65 to 75 in that range, because it's not too much, not too little. And we'll check our checkpoint here before and after. Before and after. Okay, now we're gonna go down here to sharpening. And you hold Alt, bring up the mask. And the reason why you do this is because if you bring this all the way down, everything is white there. So that means whatever is white is being affected. So you bring up masking, and we only want to affect what is supposed to be sharpened, because if you don't, you are going to sharpen image noise, which is not cool. So I like to mask everything out to what I want to be sharpened. Bring up my sharpening. Usually I started at like 55, and then I'll zoom in. It might be a little bit backwards, and I'll double click, see where it started, and then we can just hit Control Z. Now we can see what type of impact that made. So we're gonna go to 58, and then sometimes I like to hold Alt, go to Detail, and just bring up those details just a little bit, nothing too bad. So either like 28, maybe like 30. I don't do this with every single image, but we're gonna do it here just for editing purposes. ISO is not bad, so we're not gonna need any noise reduction. And then with grain, I have a couple presets with grain over here. I usually use Bear the Grain. Where are you? There they are. Bear the Grain. Low. Just add a little bit there. And then we're going to take one last final look here before we make our finishing touches on working in the light. I feel like those whites can come down just a little bit. And bring down this side just a little bit too. And bring up those shadows just a tad. Now we're going to go to the masking section. We're going to work in the light. Now, Lightroom has a new masking system. Got some objects, range, of course, that's always been there, linear, brush, and then there's people. But I'm guessing people only show up when there's faces. So we're going to hit radial. Hold Shift because this keeps your circle perfect there. Bring that out. Right click, invert, and then I like to start with negative 0.35. That's looking pretty good. And then we're going to right click here, duplicate, and invert, and then we're going to hold Shift. Bring that down, there, and then we're just going to bump that up to like 0.05, and then I like to add sharpening, so I'll put like 20, and then sometimes I'll add some dehaze, like maybe like 2, but this isn't the case here. And then we're going to highlight Josh, so we're going to hit select subject. Ooh, got some tree going on there, hit subtract. Brush. Okay, awesome. That's already up there. And then we're going to brush away this bush down here, and he's looking good. I'm hit by like way too much. 0.1. Maybe bring up the shadows on him just a little bit. Bring up the white just a little bit on him. And the highlights. Oh, he's really popping there. And then, now what we're going to do is, we are going to maybe add just a touch of sharpening on here. Next we're going to add a linear mask here so we can drive the eye towards Josh. Too drastic. Add another linear mask on the opposite side, but not as much. I'm actually going to feather it out. Here, go like to maybe -0.2, and then I want to enhance this part right here because the light is hitting that rock, so we can get a radial mask. Bring that up to like 0.1. Okay. Maybe add a little bit of dehaze. And then we're going to get a linear mask. I want to like enhance some light coming down through here. So I really want to make that nice and feathered. And then maybe bump that up by 0.1. Maybe even 0.15. Yeah, just a little bit. Minor adjustments here. And then this is before the masks, and then after the masks. Look at that. Before and after. Sick. Like this. And then let's go before, after. See if there's any more tweakage that we need to do. And then I'm gonna see possibly, let's see, some saturation difference. I don't like to add saturation as a whole because I feel like it's too much. I usually just use vibrance if I'm gonna use it, but usually I just leave it at 0. Or depending on the shot, like this, I might bring it down to like -2, you know? And then bring those greens up just a little bit. That way they're not as, you know, muted and kind of lifeless. So let's check this one more time, before and after. Alright. Let's try to tweak just a little bit more with the curves. And we are done. So this is the photo we started out with, and this is what we ended up with. Now keep in mind, there are so many different ways that I could have edited this photo, but anymore, I feel like my edits have just gravitated more towards a very natural feel. So I just try to stick more towards basic, natural, you know, not so much of going overboard with editing anymore, because things become very heavy and it's really easy to go overboard with your edits. I feel like, you know, when it comes down to your photos, at least personally for mine, it's best to just enhance them in a way to keep things of a natural feel, because then the photo speaks for itself instead of the edit, you know? But anyways, I know it's been a little bit, but if you liked hanging out with me today, remember to destroy the like button. It makes a huge difference. Hit the comment section down below. I'm always down for some conversation. If you haven't yet, you should definitely subscribe, and of course, don't forget, just explore and bear the summit. Catch you later, folks. Oh, also, I forgot. remember, it's important to stay hydrated. And you know, there's so many different ways to close out a video, but we're just gonna keep the dust away from the lens. So, peace out.